Welcome to Just Keep Walking. We're a podcast focused on the Walking Dead TV show, and today we're interviewing another very special guest, someone who's worked on the show. But before we get to introducing him, I am your host, Ben. I'm joined by my lovely two co-hosts.
Liam?
The legend, Liam.
Liam the legend.
I am Isaac.
And Isaac. And so today's guest has been an editor on the show from seasons 4 to 9. Editor and assistant editor, worked in sort of that whole editorial department, and we're really excited to be chatting with him. Worked on so many amazing episodes, lots that I'm sure are going to be on your favourites list. So please help me in welcoming Evan Schrodek.
Yeah.
And am I actually saying that name right, Schrodek?
You are.
Okay.
You nailed it. You're one of the few people to actually nail it. Yeah,
okay.
that works.
That would be embarrassing.
I'm happy to discuss anything that I've got. You know, I was on from season 4 through season 9. I still have a wealth of friends and people that I worked with, you know, over the years over there. So it's just like a big family, which is really cool. It's kind of unusual in the way that television works. So they're a wonderful bunch.
Fantastic. That's awesome.
Can I just say right off the bat, you're maybe the third person already to describe it as a family, which is it's always so cool to hear about. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think from like the showrunner, the current showrunner, basically all the showrunners, all the way down, you know, currently it's Angela Kang, who's amazing, just an amazing human being and just a wonderful talent. And I'm thrilled that she's getting the opportunity to run that show. Everyone sort of just understands that it's this big unified front that we're trying to tell some really compelling stories in a really difficult, challenging way. And although there are a group of people that are sort of set up in Georgia and Sonoya, and we're sort of based primarily in Los Angeles, we're still like this team that works back and forth. And it's really cool to see all of those things that we work so hard on basically go out into the world, and we see that fans respond to them, and it's really an exciting experience.
That's awesome.
Amazing. Fantastic. Could you tell us a bit about your roles on the show? At least from what I can see on IMDb, you've been in both the role of assistant editor and main editor for the show. What do both of those roles entail?
Basically, as an assistant editor, when I started out on the show on season 4, which was, as you well know, it's basically there's sort of stasis within the group. They're in the prison. It's the whole battle with the governor, you know, leading to that big mid-season finale. And then the gang is sort of dispersed to the winds. But when I came on as an assistant editor, what you do is you prep all the material that comes in from Georgia when they shoot down in Sonoya. They shoot on 16 millimeter film, they process it in a lab down there, and then they send the media to us in Los Angeles. Okay. We sync and prep and prepare that footage for the editors to start assembling. We also do a wealth of sound design work. Like the majority of the work that you do as an assistant on that show is sound intensive, and basically any walker growl, any sort of vocalization, anything that you do sort of in genre is super reliant on sound design and score. So we'll have the opportunity to temp in a lot of that stuff, and maybe 70 to 80% of that will end up in the final mix of the show that you'll see on air. It's not to say that like the sound design team doesn't do a wonderful job sort of branching out and exploring different sounds. There just is a very short amount of time that a TV schedule has to rework and re-implement different sound stuff. So it's a cool sort of, you're thrown into the fire, you're building out massive zombie battles and gunfights and everything that something like a massive series like The Walking Dead can provide. You're providing that soundscape at a very early level. And then when you branch into picture editing purely, you know, I started doing that in season 5, and I got my sort of full-time bump in season 6. And on that end, you're working closely with one assistant, and you're cutting picture, you're developing the rhythm of a scene, you're figuring out what the heart of each character is trying to accomplish over the course of an episode, and you're just wanting to be the first viewer of a piece of television, and you get to see those characters sort of come to life before it's broadcast for a worldwide audience.
Oh, fascinating. That's awesome. So you're saying about like sort of developing the rhythm of the episode and the flow of everything. How closely do you usually work with the director for that? Do you both sort of do your own cut, or is that something where you very much work together on the first one?
Typically, what they'll do is they'll shoot for 8 days if it's not a mid-season or a premiere or finale. I believe those are 9-day shoots, but typically it's an 8-day shoot. And we, the editor, we're assembling the entire time they're shooting. And typically, I think we're like a day and a half behind camera, as they say. Like we're the ones that are assembling the dailies and getting everything up on its feet. And we do our editor's cut in 4 days following the last day of production. And then we submit our editor's cut just to the director who directed that particular episode. And if it was Mikey or Greg Nicotero or whoever happens to be directing that episode, they'll view that cut. And then we start a dialogue. It might be notes, it might be in-person sort of work. But what we'll end up doing from there is developing their director's cut that is then submitted to the showrunner and the other EPs that are on the show. Okay. So at first, like in feature film, the relationship between editor and director is much different. In television, the EP or the showrunner is much more like the director of the product, the end product. So you're working very closely with the showrunner in a similar fashion that the editor and a director would in the feature world.
You're right. Okay, no, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Interesting, hey?
With all that in mind, have you got a favorite episode or standout episode that you've worked on?
Oh, I have a lot. The very first sort of solo episode that I did, which was season 6, 603, which was the first sort of Glenn fake out death, which was very sort of tumultuous and looked upon in a difficult way by fans. But I absolutely love that episode. It's a lot of moving pieces. It's this massive herd that's descending upon this town. And Glenn and Nicholas get pinned in, and they're sort of up on top of this dumpster. And we built in all these really interesting, because we wanted to sort of show that Nicholas was slowly losing his mind over the course of the episode. And Scott Gimple, who was the showrunner at that point, was really adamant about planting those breadcrumbs early on. And I don't think it was scripted, but he went through, and I think we put in a couple of little heady moments where we started to get a feeling, and I think there are two before the big, finale, where we start to feel that he's losing his mind or he's being affected by the things that he's seeing out in the world. So then when we dive into his head and it's this crazy sort of earringy soundscape kind of thing, it feels earned. It feels like we were building to that moment. And to be perfectly honest, when I read that script, no one told me, that this was not real, that he actually survived. And I think I had to ask after the fact. I was like, wait, what's the deal here? Because even in the script phase amongst other crew members, they're very cagey about what they want to sort of reveal or let out, because I think they're just concerned like it may impact the way in which the principal crew creates that episode. They almost want you to edit it with the intention that you think Glenn just died, And, it was always sort of, in my mind, as a big fan of the comic, like, oh, he meets his demise in that interaction with Negan. There's no way that we lose him right here. And then it's like, holy shit, what happened?
Oh, wow. So at what point did you find out? Was that after the edit or before you actually
I think it was in the conversations that I had with Scott after the fact. Okay. I worked on 603 and then I immediately worked on 607 of that season. I don't exactly recall when that aired, but that is the episode in which he makes his return from underneath the dumpster that I know is very controversial amongst fans. But that was always Scott's plan. And, I thought Scott did a brilliant, job with a number of different turns, during his tenure. One of my other favorite episodes that I had a chance to work on was, I believe it's 509, which is the Tyrese, when Tyrese gets bitten with Noah, when they're in it's another sort of heady, cerebral, strange episode with a lot of sort of flashback characters and things like that. And I love when that show sort of breaks the typical boundaries of go out, get supplies, come back, talk about it, encounter some walkers in the interim. I love when they would sort of expand upon that and play around with time and space.
Oh, 100%. And that episode is definitely stands out as one of my favorites. Just the whole way it's put together with, from the start, you're seeing kind of these strange flashbacks and things going on that you don't quite understand until later in the episode when you go into Tyrese's head. But just the whole way that all unfolds is amazing. Hey, was those flashback sequences? Did you play around a lot with how they would unfold and how that all?
We did. To be perfectly honest, a lot of that was scripted. Scott Gimple wrote that episode, and he had a very clear idea as how he wanted those individual pieces to unfold. And he's just like he's a tactician with the way he approaches story, and he does a really unique, interesting job with that. So we started playing around with it. I was a co-editor on that episode. I worked with one other editor, and we started exploring all sorts of different formalistic, strange things. And then Scott came in and was like, no, I'd love to see it up on its feet exactly how I had envisioned it. And you have to honor that, you have to give them that shot. And it worked really, really well.
Yeah, nice. And probably, I imagine it'll be the same answer, but towards the end where you've got just that one wide shot after Tyrese dies of them, taking him out of the car and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It's just so perfect the way that scene unfolds, and I find that to be really touching. But was that a decision on your part? Was there any other version of the scene where there were more close-ups?
I think there did exist additional coverage of that moment, but it was one of those things where we wanted to be in his head for the vast majority of that episode. And I think it's a long shot of him looking out the window that slowly we realize, the viewer, he's gone, and I don't think it would service character or that moment if we were back inside that car. So we felt like if we go back wide and, the soul is leaving his body or something like that, and we just observe this scene from afar, we felt it was far more moving and touching. There was also a bit of temp score that we were using, because when you work in picture editorial, you get to choose the first pieces of score that you play around with when you lay that down on your Avid timeline. And I was temping with a ton of stuff from, I don't know if you guys have ever seen the film Upstream Color. There's this indie feature called Upstream Color, and it's got this amazing score. And if you listen to sort of what Bear McCreary was able to do, you'll see sort of the echoes of that temp. Not that, he did an amazing job creating something new and original, and that's what a composer brings to the show. But you can sort of still feel the little artifacts, the interesting influence of that in that moment. And we found it really moving. It's still one of my absolute favorite episodes.
Oh, fantastic. That's awesome. Did you want to jump in with one of those?
Yeah. So regarding 806, did you have any idea that Carl got bit when he did?
To be perfectly honest, I did not.
Okay.
And they were very much like, I'm trying to sort of choose my words carefully, but it's one of those things, again, like I had sort of mentioned with the thing with Glenn, I think it was very important for them to reveal things about a character's ultimate passing very slowly. And if you want to have that discussion with a cast regular who's been a part of this family, for years and years and essentially his entire childhood, that's a very challenging thing to do, to come to somebody and say, we need to move on. We need to sort of play this moment. And initially I did not, in the script, I don't believe it was even written in that way. The way it was written was there was an altercation. He basically had this altercation with this walker out on this run, and we don't know necessarily what had happened. I believe there's actually some pickup material to sort of increase the tension and danger in that scene. Not that it wasn't, really well done, but Greg Nicotero stepped in and did some really cool pickups, and he directs a lot of the great second unit stuff that's done on that show. And he sort of got what they were after. And we storyboarded some additional pieces to lend a little bit of clarity, because you don't want, when something like that is paid off, you want to feel like it's earned. You know what I mean? Like you want to feel like it came from a place. It wasn't just like, oh, he brushed up against this walker and now he's got this bite on his stomach or something like that. It had to feel like he was in peril to the point that something like that could happen. But, also like when you're a picture editor on a series, your overall job is to like, how do I elevate and make the showrunner's vision the best it possibly can be, and that's our goal, that's our task. And we wanted to make sure we had all the stuff to make that mid-season finale reveal really, really satisfying.
Amazing. And you can really you can sort of see when you go back and look at 806 that the elements are there. You can see the other walker coming towards him, and then the close-up of his face, in a bit more shock than he would usually be. We knew people would go back and look too.
Of course,
it
was like, of course, the fan. And it's also like, I think it's always in the back of like a showrunner's minds when you have a moment like what went down with like Glenn's, did he or did he not die? I think fan reaction does influence the filmmaker to a certain degree, and they have to be sort of cognizant of, the way that people responded to that incident. And, I'm sure there is concern like, oh, shit, are we going to have another sort of moment that's not necessarily fulfilling? But I think in service of like the greater arc of the story, I know that's, again, like, I just realized I have a role in two very controversial exchanges with character deaths. I think ultimately it set the table for some really interesting things that transpired later in the series.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, that's definitely. And it is one of those things where everyone's got their own opinion, but I'm not completely against it. I think, as long as these things contribute to the story, and even Glenn's sort of fake out death, like you can see how that affects Maggie and all these other characters who aren't sure if he's alive. And so, even though it's controversial, I think, you can definitely see that there's a vision there, and those things do still play a part in the story. So,
absolutely. Yeah. I mean, to make essentially 16 episodes of television really compelling and engaging, it's sometimes fans, it seems like people just want, just have them go out on a run, kill some walkers and come back. And I always love that, like, Scott and Angela and all the showrunners involved in that series took some big swings and some big chances and things that they knew deep down would probably piss some people off, but I am appreciative that they took some big chances with that series, because it'd probably be really easy to sit back and just go, okay, it's going to be the zombie of the week. We're just going to do the same essential thing. And they were willing to push that series in a place that, some other showrunners might not have been brave enough to go.
Well, it's like they say, comfort is the old enemy of progress. So it's
exactly. Yeah. Comfort is a slow death. Yes.
Yeah. Well, just Ben has warned me not to go off asking rogue questions. So
no. You're welcome to.
Regarding sort of first edits and whatnot, I'm not sure kind of how closely you work alongside the cinematographer or the director of any given episode, but how much sort of work do you put into, a draft of whatever you're doing before whoever's higher up comes up and says, no, this isn't quite it, or yes, you've hit the nail on the head, and then you push forward with that you're working on?
Right. Yeah. I mean, we are a picture editor in television in particular, you may be sending scenes to an EP or somebody who's, higher up on the show, but typically you're working sort of in isolation. But at that point, if you've been with the show for a while, if you've assisted and you've been on it, you know what the beats of the characters are, you know how an episode should feel, how it should look, how it should sound, and you're turning in the most polished, presentable version of what the showrunner would love or would want to work with or would want to jump off from. Sometimes you'll have a director come in for their 4 days. And again, in television, the director is much more of not necessarily a day player. They're a very integral role, but they go from job to job. They may work 6, 7 different shows, whereas you're with that series for the entire season. And it's sort of your job to honor and uphold like the stylistic choices of what's been established. They always sort of said that Walking Dead was a Western, and it plays in certain tableaus that look and feel like a Western, even though it's post-apocalyptic, So I think we're always examining reference films and making sure that pacing and tone match those characteristics. And if we have a director that wants to try something, that's fine, but we'll always sort of keep potentially an alternate version of a scene or a sequence in our back pocket, just saved, tucked away, so that when they watch the episode, they go, this doesn't feel like what I want it to feel like. And I'll say, we've got this other thing, take a look at this real quick, and they'll say, I like your version better, and you're off to the races, But the most collaborative side of it is when you get in with the showrunner and you're working towards addressing notes and expanding upon elevating the script, because an 8-day shoot, often you don't get everything that you want. Things don't work out quite as well as you would have hoped. And it's a train that keeps rolling. They got another episode that's coming down the track. So you have to do the very best with what you currently have, and you got to be quick with it.
Awesome.
With all that in mind, then, like, how many versions does an edit go through?
Let's see, there's the editor's cut, there's the director's cut, there's the producer's cut that then goes to network, and then AMC will weigh in typically twice, sometimes 3 times if it's a bigger episode, a premiere or finale. So I don't know how many that is. 5 or 6 sort of iterations of a cut exist, but then you'll also have sort of work in progress cuts that are sort of intermediary, versions of full episodes. It all depends on what the director wants to do when they come in and work their days. Sometimes you'll cut stuff with them all day and send them a new version, and they'll be off and running. But it is like the crazy part transpires sort of midway through the season when you have maybe 3 different episodes in varying states of post-production. I may have dailies coming in for episode 11, and then I'm in the midst of a showrunner's cut on 7, and then 3 or 4 is reviewing VFX, and I have to put eyes on some shots. That's when it's the most sort of tiresome and churning, because you're trying to stay up with your dailies, but you're also trying to give an equal amount of attention to the other episodes. You want all of your children, to be well fed, so to speak.
100%. I think, Mikey Satrazemis also used the children example.
Yes.
He said, having to cut a shoot short or leave things out of an episode is like drowning your children in a bathtub.
Oh, no.
Mikey does such a good job. I always loved whenever I think one season I got like almost all Mikey episodes, but I think in season 9, I did the mid-season finale, which is, 908, which is one of my.
That's Liam's favorite episode as well.
That's one of my favorite episodes of like all time. Like I felt like all aspects of production, we were all clicking. Like I'm a big genre horror fan, so I have seen and watched everything, and I was like, oh, this is so much fun. We just get to play in this sandbox with these characters that we love in a really interesting, unusual space with introducing the Whisperers.
On a similar sort of train of thought then, do you have to often, or yeah, do you often have to cut scenes out for time? And if you do, are there any like standout ones that you have?
Yeah, I mean, often there are a number of omits, that happen over the course of a season or a series, but typically, if something's great, it tends to stay in the cut. Usually what we'll do is we'll have shorter, sort of more truncated versions of scenes where not all of the beats play. I think it was, I'm blanking on the number. Was it 805? Anyway, I think there are a number of different moments that you go, this doesn't refine character, this doesn't give us this moment. Sometimes shorter is always the better solution, and you'll have a more truncated version of that scene. And I always felt like the episodes played better, tighter. God, there was I think in the mid-season of season 8, the long discussion that Maggie has in the car when the convoy is stopped by Negan's men. That, I believe, there were a number of sort of extended moments and beats and standoff. And the thing is, like, what starts to feel like a repeated beat, or what sort of feels like tension, and you have to sort of weigh that and make an educated decision as to what you want to do. I think Scott did a really cool job, though. He would always offer like an extended version. I think if you purchase like the Blu-rays or something like that, you can watch and view all. So we would always save that. Scott would be like, that's for the Blu-ray, that's for the Blu-ray. We'll save those sequences for those deep dive fan experiences, if you want to sort of see every beat, every moment, that transpired. And those are essentially what we call like a line cut. Those are cut to script. Nothing has been removed or omitted. So that's one of those things that's really cool to have. But typically, yeah, if something's like big or VFX heavy or Walker-ish or something like that, we're gonna try our best to put that in the show, or even enhance it or build upon it.
Oh, well, fantastic. I'm curious to hear then about like how you sort of determine the pacing of things. So I do video production just for like ads and things like that. So
that's cool.
So not the same sort of story, but I know how hard it can be to get the pacing of even though 30-second ad to feel right. So do you like go through and do a rough cut and then watch the whole episode and see, oh, this part felt a bit slow? Or how do you determine that for a whole 40-minute episode?
Typically what we'll do is, when my bins are I think they call them bins, because back in the days of editorial, when it was filmed, there were physical film was hanging in bins. So in the Avid software, they're so-called bins. We get scene by scene. So, it's if my assistant is prepping scene 4 or something like that, and it's a big dialogue scene, I will cut and then refine just that scene out of context of the entire episode. And then I'll get it to a place that I feel good, or I feel like this is working, or this is interesting, or I'm hitting all these moments. Let's tuck this away. This feels like it's in a really good place. Once everything gets to that place and it's been refined sort of out of context, I'll assemble the entire episode. And then I'll start to watch segments. I'll break them into, I think they're just acts. Yeah, because I think each episode is about 5 acts. If they call them acts because the commercial breaks and everything. And we usually have like a little out to each one. So you work in sequence on those individual acts, and I'll refine the teaser, act 1, act 2. I'll get them in a place picture-wise that I feel great, and then I'll hand those off to my assistant, who will then refine and add the sound design. And usually they're doing sound design if it's a big walker heavy scene or a battle or something like that. They're working right alongside me. So they're building out all that sound work at the same pace in which I'm cutting stuff. So we kind of just work in constant communication. And then once the whole thing's up on its feet, I'll sit back and I'll watch the whole thing down. and then you can sort of see what's working, what needs to be refined, what needs to be sort of worked or changed. But typically you're under the gun and you're getting your very last day, and you have maybe 2 to 3 days to assemble the entire cut. So, and it has to be polished, it has to have sound, it has to have music, you know, it has to feel like a real episode. So when the director sees it, they're going, wow, this is a great piece of work, you know. This is almost a finished episode. I just need to change a couple of things and we'll be well on our way.
Oh, wow. And just to expand on something you said about ads as well, with, you know, with putting the commercial breaks in, do you have to sort of fit the episode into exact chunks of time, or how does that work, deciding where the commercials go?
Early when in seasons 4 and 5, I believe AMC did make us adhere to a format sheet in which each act could only be a certain duration. You couldn't exceed, I think, of runtime of 42 minutes and 50 seconds. Anything like plus or minus 10 seconds over that was out of format. Right. And you had to tighten it up and refine it to get to that point. As the show became more and more massive and popular and huge, we were doing these big, bombastic, like 90-minute episodes. And then like the format, I think, kind of went out the window a little bit because they were like, we have these massive stories to tell. We want to have, you know, almost a feature length piece of real estate to tell them in. So I think in season 7, honestly, I think it started with the finale of season 6, which is actually one of my favorite episodes. I did not cut that episode. Dan Liu cut that episode. And that is one of my favorites. It's a really strong episode. And I think because of the way in which we began to stretch time, they just started playing with it, and scripts got bigger and more massive. And I think sometimes that can be a detriment, but it all depends. You know, if you can tell a compelling story in 42 minutes as opposed to 50, great.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
That's cool.
And is there ever any inspiration drawn from the comic source material at all? Is that ever played?
Yeah. You know, like I think both Scott and Angela, like they were really cognizant of individual panels within the comic. They wanted to sort of replicate that with the particular frame. They really did a good job honoring and seeing that and feeling that, and giving a nod to the fans is a really big deal to them. Like they understand what the fan base wants. They're attached to the comic, and there's a lot of really great source material to pull from. So we would do our very best to honor that. Typically it was orchestrated in a way in pre-production, like the directors, they would all, the showrunner, there's basically a big tone call that, maybe Mikey spoke to this, when a particular episode goes into production, we all have what's called just a big tone call where all the department heads talk through the script. It's led by the showrunner, and they'll point out little markers, you know, throughout the episode. Let's give a nod to the comic here. This is a really big moment for the fans there. You know, is there an interesting or dynamic way in which we can shoot this? And then it's the cinematographer and the director's job to come up with a really cool or scary or interesting way to do that. And then like when it comes into editorial, I'm like, oh, I have to feature that. That's the way to do it. You know, you can't throw that stuff out. You'll get fired. No, you won't get fired, but
I like it.
Nice.
Liam, did you want to chat right in?
Yeah, absolutely. Can I ask, what was it like directing, not directing, sorry, I'm
editing.
losing my bearing. Editing. Verbal diarrhea. Editing Rick's final episode.
Yeah, that personally was a really, really important, touching episode for me, because I came up as a fan of the comic, and even when I was in grad school for film, I would stay up late working on my own shot lists and stuff, and I would watch The Walking Dead. You know, it was a big show to me. I was a fan of the series before I even worked on it. And I love that character. You know, I remember, you know, even from that premiere, which is one of the best things I've seen on television from season 1, it was really kind of special to develop this connection with the character and then see them grow and change and develop in a way that you never thought was possible. To be part of that final episode was really, really, really special. And it was one of those things where you get the script early on, you know, something's a big deal. But like, I think it really dawned on me when I started getting all the footage in from the bridge crossing. That was such a monumental undertaking that Greg Nicotero pulled off. Like, he did such a great job with that episode. It's a really, really special one. And we just wanted to make sure it was a satisfying moment, you know, because it's the point in which we were sort of jumping into a new era or a new, you know, world after that moment. And we just wanted to honor that. We wanted to honor that journey, and make it feel earned, sort of like we've talked about with individual scenes. You want to make that character feel earned and feel satisfying.
Yeah.
Oh, cool. And well, with that episode in particular, and this applies to sort of all of them really, but how does it work editing with visual effects shots? Because I imagine those would get done sort of after the main visual cut. But the one example is when Rick sort of walks into the sea of bodies when he's having a hallucination, and you know, the shot just holds on the wide where you see Shane in the foreground, and there's just little touches like that which is so well paced. Did you have to make those decisions before you saw any of the effects, or how did that work?
We were making some of those decisions, yes, but there, I believe there were some practical elements. We saw some of the bodies in the foreground, and it was a nod to, I don't remember the particular issue, but it is a nod to one of the comic covers. I apologize for not recalling which one, but Scott Gimple had one that he wanted to give an homage to that was really important. So I had an opportunity to take a look at that. The cool thing about being in the Walking Dead offices, they have all the comics there. So if you want to like revisit a moment or see something, or like, how did this sort of unfold? I want to sort of pace it in a way that feels like that. You can check that out. But that was one of those things that I had seen. A lot of it is just like using your imagination as a filmmaker and going, this is something that I feel like will take such and such amount of time to unfold. We want the audience to sort of soak this in and just sort of be with him in this moment. How do we make that satisfying? And typically we'll have those discussions too with our VFX vendor and our VFX supervisor as to what that will look like and what that will feel like. And they can sort of help inform us. If I go to them and I say, how long does this moment need to play? Can I run this 5 seconds? They're like, it's going to get real dicey if you do. Can you play it, you know, in this duration? And then we have that discussion and we'll sort of refine things from there. It's always kind of an open conversation. I think the VFX supervisor, his office was right next to mine, so I could always sort of pop in and see what was going on, or show him. I would, if I had a rough sketch of something, I would say, this is how I think this is going to play. Is this doable? And I would bring him in. He'd look. He says, not quite like that. We need this one piece here to cut back to it there. And then we'll sort of readjust to it. But yeah, that was a really, really big, cool episode, because it was one of those things that just spending those moments with Herschel too, who passed away not long after that episode aired, and he was just he was a phenomenal actor and just a wonderful human being, and just to be able to take part in that was really special too.
That's fantastic. Was that one, would you say, like, there was more control from the showrunners and stuff like that, obviously being such a big episode? Did the overall process change at all for big things like that, or finales, or is it more or less the same sort of process?
I think for something that's big, there's a lot of eyes on those episodes, and you want to make sure that, like, the premiere, the finale, those mid-season finales really land on their feet and play great. So I think there is additional pressure for everyone involved to make it really special and to honor that, you know. So I think we all worked really, really hard. Greg Nicotero, like that entire team in production, they did some amazing work on that episode. And it was just one of those that I'm glad every once in a while I'll go to. You can go in Los Angeles, they do the Talking Dead screenings. And often I'll go, and I won't like obviously tell anyone that I work on the show, but I love watching an episode for the first time with an audience. You know, it's even if it's just a small crowd of people, like it's really cool, because typically I'm just in a dark room, you know, watching it by myself and going like, is this evocative? Is this sort of emotionally resonant? And then just getting to spend time with people and see their reaction is really neat.
That's got to be very satisfying, I can imagine. Yeah. Seeing all the beats play out. Oh, nice.
For sure.
I'd love to go back to some of the stuff you touched on towards the start, just about, you know, the process of
course,
cutting and editing and stuff like that. So Isaac, did you want to?
Oh yes, thank you, Ben.
That one?
First of all, so shooting on film, what's that like, and sort of what's the process digitizing that? I don't know if you've watched much of World Beyond at the moment. You've seen the contrast between how everything is so sharp and very high res versus, you know, the grittiness of what you've worked on. What are the sort of challenges that go along with that, and how do you digitize all that?
It's interesting. I mean, they're one of the last productions to still shoot on film. When Frank Darabont, who created the series, came up with the idea, I think he was one of the people who set that up in the beginning. He wanted it to have the look and feel and texture of a graphic novel, of a comic. So it's something that they went with and they ran with. And there are limitations, because it sort of limits the amount of, we call it kind of hose it down coverage that you can get. Okay. You can't run and run and run and run, because you have to reload those mags, and it's time consuming. You can get 4 cameras on stuff, but it's a little more difficult than just having something where you can just run and reset takes. So I think like each director and each cinematographer is very cognizant of that fact. And then they frame things, they shoot things in a particular way that lends itself to that. And it doesn't mean it's right or wrong, but one of the things that was always kind of a pain is, if you needed to sort of artificially create an additional piece of coverage, you would have to, typically if something was shot on video, you could resize it, you could blow it up massively. If it was shot on 4K, you would have that latitude to grab a shot of their hands picking up a coffee cup or something like that. With film, because of the nature of the grain, I think we only ever pushed it like 100 or 15%. You know, you really didn't have that range to blow stuff up, and you want to have all the tools in your tool belt when you're working with that kind of material. And you know, if I've got to resize something so somebody's eyes pop, you know, when they look at someone in a reaction, you want to have that available. And it's just one of those things that's a little weird when you deal with that. But yeah, everything was shot. It's shot down in Sonoya, and there's I think like a Kodak subsidiary, or there's a lab that processes all the film there and then digitizes it through telecine, and then creates individual files for each of those takes. And then they upload that to Los Angeles via Aspera transfer. And then we pull that down onto our servers, and then we're able to get at the media. So I never actually saw any of the actual film stock, you know, like we only got it, you know, in the camera reports and everything like that.
Mm-hmm. And why only 15%? What actually happens to film when you blow it up? Like, I thought you had more freedom than with digital stuff. Which
it's 16 millimeter, because the frame size is not the same size as 35 millimeter. It's much smaller.
Gotcha.
So any like the ability to sort of blow that up is reduced, because you just start seeing more and more of the grain structure, and it depends on how well it was exposed too. If it was really well exposed, you probably have a little more range. But if it's a dark or sort of dusky kind of look, it's probably a touch underexposed, and you feel a little more of that grain and that noise. And they would run things through like denoising, processing if we had to go back to the lab and blow some stuff up. But typically it was just one of those where like we're gonna have to deal with it. We're gonna have to just run with it. But yeah, it was interesting. It definitely didn't limit the coverage, but I know some shows just get an absolutely insane amount of footage per day. And I think we probably the editors were saved some of that pain just because of the fact that they had to shoot 16.
That's interesting. Yeah, it really does change the whole process. Just not being able to run forever on digital, hey.
Which is not wrong in any way either. It's just a different way of working. Yeah. So it's just a matter of, I cut plenty of those kinds of shows too, and they turn out great. And Matt Negretti, who is a wonderful guy who's doing the show running on World Beyond, I haven't had a chance to sort of really dig into what they were able to do in that season, but like all I hear is just he's just doing a phenomenal job with that.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, very well done, definitely. So you talked a little bit about putting in temp music and things like that before to like just determine the feel of the scene, and I had a chat a little while ago with Sam Ewing as well, one of the
I know Sam. I know Sam very well. Yeah, he's a wonderful guy. I like Sam.
Oh, fantastic. And he
did you guys talk to any other editors yet, or am I the first one? Did you get to talk to any?
Yeah,
first one. Oh man. You should talk to Dan Liu at some point. He was an editor who went on to direct a number of the episodes, and he got to sort of help him and one of the editors, Julius Ramsey. Those two guys were very influential on the look and the feel and the pace of that show. In particular, the sound design. He put me through like the sound intensive school when I was there as an assistant, and you just learn a lot of tricks when you come up on a show that's that big.
Put him on to us, man. We'll absolutely.
I've actually reached out to Dan Liu, and he said he's trying to focus on other projects at the moment. Which is fair enough.
I'm gonna give him a hard time now.
But put in a word for us if you like to.
He's a good guy. Yeah, he's directing right now too. So maybe that's it.
No, he's a man of many talents. He's done. He did an episode on World Beyond as well, directing. So he's
cool.
Man, he's got his hands in a lot of things. Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure.
Amazing. But regarding the music side of things, could you maybe expand a little bit more into that how you determine the feel of a scene, and do you often experiment, do something very different and just see how it feels?
Yeah, I mean, you sort of start to understand the language and like the grammar of what the show typically does with score. And Bear McCreary is an incredibly talented composer. Sam is immensely talented as well. And we'll have back catalogs of all the previous seasons' scores that have been created over the course of the entire run of the show. And that's the thing that's kind of advantageous. In post-production, typically, if you're starting from scratch on a season 1 show, you kind of have to bring your elements from whatever else you came from, as opposed to something that ran 10, 11 seasons. You've got this massive catalog of sound effects and score that was created specifically for your series. So we'll have a lot of stuff to pull from, but I would always kind of mix things up with, again, I'm just a big genre horror thriller fan, and if there are things that I see that I like that kind of speak to me a little bit, I'll try and track those down, or I'll have an assistant track down those temps.
Nice.
I think in episode 808 908, I was doing a lot of stuff from the first Purge, because I'm friends with that composer as well. This guy Kevin Lax, who does a wonderful job, and I was temping with a ton of that stuff because I kind of felt like it had those same really unsettling, like undulating qualities that did a really nice job with that. So yeah, we get to play with that, and typically like Angela or Scott, like they're really open. If stuff works, it works, you know, and they'll let you temp to your heart's content as long as it still feels like the show. So we'll go through our catalog of stuff and start playing with things. The one thing that I will say that was almost, I don't remember the exact track, but in episode 607, I'm sure Scott would be pissed if I said this. We almost went to final with basically the opening of 607 unfolds. Glenn's under the dumpster. Time is transpiring. He's killing some of the walkers, and he finally emerges over this pile. There was a song that he wanted to use, and bless him, I thought it was a bold choice that really went against tone and picture, and you can actually hear the song because we ended up using it in a montage with Carol, I believe later in that season.
It's all over. Is that the one?
It's the one where she's making the cookies and she's getting and she kills the walker and she's getting she gets the blood on her sweater. It's I don't know if it's 614 or 615. I don't recall. That number is slipping my mind. But we had used that song as this weird kind of playful, unsettling thing as Glenn was sort of working his way out from underneath the dumpster. And at the last second, we were like, we can't. The fans are going to kill us. They'll just think that we're just messing with them at this point. We cannot do it. So I think it ended up being a really kind of evocative piece of score. But yeah, they'll take some big swings and try some stuff. So that was the one that stuck out. But yeah, typically we don't, I think towards the tail end, more and more source like pieces of actual recorded music came into play. But early on it was a sparse Western, you know, and that was the angle in which we were leaning into.
Nice. Yeah, and that's cool to hear that you at least, you know, just experiment with different things. Let's try something that's really out there. Hey, if it doesn't work, we'll do something else. But yeah,
at least you have the option available to do so. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, for sure. No, they always gave us a lot of freedom to play around with that, and I know some shows do not. So it was cool.
Very nice.
Along a similar train of thought, then, have you got any lessons that you've learnt from working on The Walking Dead? In terms of editing?
Yeah, I mean, I think you learn about how to sustain dread. You know, if there's a horror scene, if there's tension, you know, sometimes the best cut is not cutting, you know, and that's kind of a douchey thing to say on editorial thing. But it's like you want to draw out that tension and that dread as long as you possibly can and sort of stretch that rubber band to the point where the audience is expecting the release of a cutaway, and you don't give that to them quite at the moment in which they were expecting. Right. Also, it's just sort of keeping them on edge. You know, you want to sort of keep the viewer out of rhythm in a way that's fun and satisfying. You know, yeah. I always go into genre horror stuff because it's kind of like a roller coaster ride. I want to be scared. I want to see, you know, show me what you can. You know, I want to go on this ride with you. I'm giving myself to this particular film, and I've always respected those filmmakers that are able to sort of walk that fine line and do that kind of work. But playing in genre it's all about sound design and score. And if you've got a really quiet scene with, Carol is creeping across a rotted floorboard, you want to hear and feel the texture of the space. So if it's drips in the background from some unseen pipes, or it's the footfalls on like creaky floorboards, you want to build out all of that stuff so it feels not dry, but it feels really textured and nuanced. So that's one of those things. I think my first season on the show, I was doing a lot of sound design, and I think that the very first game of The Last of Us came out at the same time. I was playing that like at night for like 4 or 5 hours, and then I would turn right back around and like do Walker sound effects all day. And my girlfriend, now wife, she was always like, why do you want to live in this headspace for every waking hour? And I'm just like, I'm just having too much damn fun with it. You know, it's a lot of fun.
Got to be prepared, right?
Yes, exactly.
Awesome. Well, we're coming up to about an hour, so we'll probably just go over one or two more questions
Sure.
if you're happy
No
to.
problem.
Before we
Yeah,
wrap
of
it up.
course.
Cool. So, well, I've got one scene I'm keen to chat about. Then, yeah, you guys have a think if there's any last stuff you want to cover. But so in 9:14, you've got the flashbacks to Michonne when she was sort of
Yes.
encountering that whole Jocelyn's
Yes.
group and all the kids and stuff. One scene
Yes.
that stood out in that, as far as the editing goes, was the sort of finale of the episode where she's fighting all these kids, and then cutting between that and present day,
Yes.
where she's killing the walkers. So
Yes.
what was the challenges involved in that? Obviously, you don't want to be too graphic, showing killing actual
Right.
kids on screen, but yeah,
Right. There were there were a number of challenges with that because it was scripted to a certain degree, but each of those beats wasn't necessarily blocked out in the way that this is our transition between this time and space to this time and space. So I had to you basically just go through the dailies and you find those individual moments that'll play as satisfying graphic matches. And again, you're right. That was one of the things that Angela was very cognizant about, was like, we've done a lot of things on that show. We can't show her hacking like alive human children, we can't put that on air. So it was this dance that we were trying to do that I think came across as very successful, but it's also like, it kind of honors the style of the show. It plays around with space and time and memory and the way in which those change and break people. Those are some of the bigger motifs of the series. So it was cool to sort of do that in a really frenetic way. But yeah, again, it was like just staying there in the office late, trying to find those cool little moments, see if we can make these transitions play in a way that's exciting, but also doesn't give away too much. I think I don't know if it made it to the final cut or not, but there were a couple of big wide shots where you just saw all of these kids dead. And I think we lingered on it a bit too long in some of the earlier versions, and I think that got truncated and trimmed down. I think there were only a couple of instances that I heard of when I was on the show of AMC sort of bumping back about, stuff being too graphic or too over the top. If you remember when Noah gets killed in the
that revolving door, wasn't it?
Revolving door.
Oh, yeah.
There was a version of that cut that was so horrifying that Dan Liu.
It's bad enough.
Yeah.
Is this saying there's a worse version?
There exists a worse version of that I remember going in and going like, I don't know, guys, this is pretty heavy. So, which meant what they were doing was very effective, but like there is a limit to what is in good taste.
Yeah.
But thanks for mentioning that episode. That's one of my favorite things that I've cut for those guys. So
awesome.
It was a good one.
And it definitely played well, because like you said, that scene especially wasn't supposed to be about the gratuitous violence, or you're seeing Michonne's reaction. She doesn't want to be doing this, but she has to survive. So yeah, all those cuts, like you were saying, I think you just found the right spot, because you can see her swinging the sword, and then it'll cut to present day, and it continues, and it just all seems like it was planned out from the start to flow together.
Right.
So, yeah,
I
really
think
good
somebody
job.
sent me like a couple of GIFs of that moment, and I'm like, yeah, if the edit makes it to the GIF form, like you've done something correct.
100%. Fantastic.
I'm not sure if you're able to, but if you are, could you describe the alternate scene? I'm just curious.
Noah.
I want to know.
The one with Noah?
Yeah.
Like that one? It was Greg Nicotero did like some amazing prosthetic work of the face, and I think there was like a couple of moments of like cheek rip that were like too graphic for good taste in television. Wow. And it was this moment where you could oh god, there's a moment where you can tell he's like still alive, but he's like there's nothing he can do, and they're just like Glenn is just watching through the glass, and it's just like excruciating. So I think that's what it was, which means I think the editors on that episode, I think Dan, they did a wonderful job of making you feel for him in that moment. And things shouldn't just be gratuitous. They should be founded in character, and like they should be grounded in like, oh, I absolutely love this person. I've built up a relationship with this character over the course of a couple of seasons. It hurts me to watch them go through this, you know? So I think that's where those feelings came from. But yeah, I think it was a much quicker thing that was just as satisfying, but it was less horrendous.
Absolutely. Like you could see that when, for me in particular, the first image that pops to mind is when he smashes up against the glass, and that look in his eye is like, I can't do anything about this.
It's enough.
It's very
and that
brief,
was
but,
like, yeah, that's almost like the homage to, I know Greg Nicotero is a big fan of Jaws, you know, when she's attacked in the water in the opening of that, it almost had that vibe. So
yeah, true. Hey, I hadn't put those together, but yeah, you're right. That same look in the eyes.
Yes.
This is not going to end well.
For sure.
Oh, and then also just quickly pairing that up with I forget his name. Who's that absolute douchebag savior with like the long hair?
Oh, Jared.
When he meets a similar fate, but we actually get to see his his face.
He does. And he does. I cut that scene. I remember like we with someone like that, you in Game of Thrones did a number of kills like this that were immensely satisfying, and we wanted something that was not necessarily like you could be overly gratuitous because Morgan is just soaking up that moment, you know, because of everything that's brought them to this place, you know, and it's real rough, but I think that a lot of that stuff was like a first pass in the edit. Like it's a really, really fun scene, but I was like, they got great pieces. We got great performances. Let's just put this together. And I think we didn't trim that down too much. We let that linger.
Well, my last question for you, and I really appreciate it. This is always so eye-opening. You talk about the horror genre being one that you really like to work with. Typically, I really enjoy horror for the thrilling side of it, less so like I always find jump scares to be super cheap, which is something I really appreciate about this show being very, very sparing with kind of jump scares, and it's just being that constant level of suspense. But to throw the word tropey out there, are there any sort of horror tropes or techniques that you personally like to throw in your work to heighten
I can think of ones that I would prefer not to use, but like we would always joke that, you know, on the Walking Dead, girls be tripping, you know, girls be tripping. They're always either falling or someone's tripping or something's happening, you know, like that's a trope that I wish people could do a more interesting, you know, something with it. But I don't know. Like I always, you know, if there's a way just to make something really unsettling with sound or really uneasy with sound, I always love that opportunity. If it's something like, if someone's walking into an abandoned room or warehouse and they hear something small or something building over the course of their approach, and the reveal is so much more horrifying as they put the pieces together as to what that sound was, you know, I find that kind of stuff really cool and satisfying. It all depends what you do with it, but no, I don't know if there's a particular trope that I like to just make things good.
I don't know how you felt about that beta hand coming through the grave, like, you know, I was like, they had to have that at some point in the show.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and that's kind of, isn't that kind of an homage to like Carrie? There's like a whole like the Stephen King adaptation. There is a world in which that, as like a genre fan, you kind of understand the rules and sort of the palette in which people paint with. So like I'm okay. I'm gonna allow it. I'll let it slide.
Yeah. great.
Oh, that's awesome. Fantastic. Well, yeah, I think we'll wrap it up there. Is there anything else that you wanted to cover or anything?
No. You know what? Thank you guys very much for having me, and thanks for being continued fans of the series. Like, we always really enjoyed putting in the really hard work and the long hours because we knew a lot of people around the globe were into it, and that means a lot. So we very much appreciate it as creatives on a series.
100% mutual.
And yeah, definitely. We appreciate all the work that goes into it. It is the sort of thing that, we'll go back and rewatch episodes. So all those little beats that you've worked really hard on, they definitely don't go unnoticed. So
for sure. Yeah.
Hey.
The technicality of it, it's not lost on us. We really do appreciate the finer tweaks.
That's cool. Yeah. All of those little moments, a lot of work and care and thought has gone into those. So it's cool that you guys are able to sort of. Do you guys have a favorite season? I always like to ask fans if they have a all-time favorite season of the show.
So for me,
because I do. I have a favorite season, but I'll ask you.
Yeah. Okay, definitely let us know yours. For me, it would be 9, closely followed by 4.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
9, hands down.
9.
Yep.
Okay.
I'm the outlier here. I like I really like season 1, but season 2 simply for the barn reveal at the end. That just got me.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Very cool. I really, really like season 5. I think is very, very good. I had a lot of fun on that one. And season 9. Yeah, those two. I think there were a lot of really cool episodes in season 9. But season 5, I think personally, like that premiere is one of my favorite episodes that they've done. And then I think the finale for season 6 is one of the best things that they've done. It's a really striking episode.
Absolutely.
But cool. Yeah. No, that adds up. That adds up.
Yeah, nice. But yeah, it is one of those things that it's very hard to choose a favorite because they're all good and in their own unique ways. But I mean, season 5 is like, seeing all the different locations they go to, just traveling out on the road and meeting Alexandria. There's so much great stuff to love about all of those seasons. So yeah, mate, hard to choose.
Yeah, for sure. Cool.
Fantastic.
Well, thank you guys very much. I really appreciate it.
No, thank you. I really appreciate it too. And we'll leave you to your evening. But yeah, thanks again for taking the time out. And
thank you very much.
Sounds great, guys. Appreciate it. Have a good one.
Same to you.
See ya.
See ya.
Did you want to record any afterthoughts just on this while we're...
Yeah, why not?
What happened in season 5?
What's that?
What was season 5 about again? Just recap.
Starts at Terminus. The very first episode is where they escape Terminus.
Yeah.
And then there's on the road for a while, they meet Father Gabriel. They all split up. Abraham's group finds out that Eugene was lying. And then they meet Aaron and comes into Alexandria in sort of the second half.
Your questions, Ben, are always such fire. Like,
Thank you.
You can tell they appreciate it too. It's good.
Oh, that's good. That's good.
For sure.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Did you want to quickly plug our online stuff?
Yeah, 100%. So we have started something new. We're on Patreon for a while, but Patreon, it could be better. They take a big chunk of your money, which kind of defeats the purpose of it, and there's a lot of restrictions and things like that. So what we've done is we've set up through PayPal. It's still very safe, and your money's always protected through PayPal. But we've gone and set up something on our website where you can contribute monthly or annually to the show, just to sort of support the costs and things that go into it. From our end, we have to sort of pay for the microphones and to publish it all, but also just if you'd like to show your appreciation, it definitely means a lot to us. But there's also going to be bonuses that we'll continue to say thank you as well, which we're still working on. It's still very new. But definitely we're going to be doing more interviews and things like that. So if you'd like to submit questions and have certain things in the interviews, then that's definitely a plus that's going to come out of being plugged in. And also we'll just record some bonus things at the end of most of the episodes we do. So do some bonus segments and extended interviews and things like that. Yeah.
Another great thing is people who plug in at turnsounds.com, by the way.
Oh, yes. That's important.
Even if you're just like fans of the show like we are and you want to come on this show and have chats with us, you're more than welcome to do that. And that's highly encouraged for those of you who plug in at turnsounds.com.
Turnsounds.com in case you missed it. So should we? Yeah. Well. What were your key takeaways, and then we'll do maybe like a short after segment, which we'll make exclusive. But for the non-exclusive version, how did you like that interview? Any particular standout?
No, I tell you what. Look, exclusive.
Okay. Well. Okay. All right. So if you haven't plugged in, then the episode will cut short here. But thanks so much for listening, and go get plugged in, and we'll have some more for you on the website.
Bye.
Adios.